Welcome tonight. This is our last lecture of the year here at Lawrence Tech, although there's another lecture that we're having on Monday, so we keep on adding them. So I thank you all for coming, and it looks like we're going out in grand style. My name is Glenn Laroy, and I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design. And you're here on a very special night for us because it involves numerous events that are colliding all this week, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. I think I'm supposed to stand here in the. Does that look better? Yeah, in the limelight. So before we move any further, though, I would like to introduce our president, Dr. Virender Madgil. And just in terms of introduction, for those of you that have not met him yet, and many of you have, Dr. Madgil was named the 7th president of Lawrence Technological University in the spring of 2012. Yes, already, how time passes. And assumed his office on July 1st. Prior to joining Lawrence Tech, he was the provost of Oakland University, where he had a stellar record of exemplary academic progress and program development. Dr. Madgil holds 3 degrees, including a doctorate from Banaras Hindu University, which is ranked as the top university in India. He was a postdoctoral fellow at the Mayo Clinic. He has also held adjunct professorships at Wayne State University and has been a visiting scientist at universities in Serbia, France, and India. I now call on Dr. Madgil to deliver some opening remarks.
Thank you, Dean Laroy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very special occasion. I don't think in Lawrence Tech, since I've been here, I have seen the size of this crowd. This speaks for itself. This is a very special time for College of Architecture and Design, for Lawrence Tech, and our visitors and friends, students, and faculty. When I moved here from Oakland University, where I maintain many friends, some are actually in the audience, my colleagues from Oakland, I had a chance to visit with my former president at a social gathering. And he asked me, he said, "Virender, how is it going at Lawrence Tech?" I said, "It's going well." He said, "You got the College of Architecture." That's the only thing he remembered, that he thought it was so good, nationally known, renowned for its contribution and the quality of education. So I'm very, very privileged to be with you tonight. So I'd like to thank you all for attending the Taubman Lecture Series at the College of Architecture and Design, featuring tonight's speaker, Thom Mayne, whom I have known for some time, an outstanding leader in the area, in the nation, perhaps in the world. He's a member of FAIA. I also want to thank all those who attended AIA's student auction tonight and continue to support our student organization and their missions. With Mr. Taubman's continuing support over the last 3 years, we have been able to deliver one of the preeminent architecture and design lecture series in the United States. Having Thom Mayne, the 2013 American Institute of Architects gold medalist, that is same as the Nobel Prize in Science in architecture. He's the gold medal winner, as tonight's speaker emphasizes the excellence of this program and of the college. We are also delighted that Mr. Mayne is the design architect for our next building on this campus, the Taubman Engineering, Life Sciences, and Architecture Building. So this is a great relationship. We are justifiably proud of the College of Architecture and Design. I speak about it all the time. Many of you have listened to me bragging about the alumni of this college. You know, there are many moms in the area, and the daughters are the prettiest in town always to moms. But external validation is very important. So when I travel, I talk about alumni because what they do in the real world is a real testament to this college and its training. So if you go around in the area, if you live here, the best malls here are designed by our graduates from this college. We had a reception at the Oakland County Airport, designed by a graduate of this college. Then you go to play football, you sit in this large stadium, designed by our graduate, where Lions play, on and on, the list goes on. I think if you consider the beauty of architecture and the impact it has on society and people who enjoy that, it's a direct testament and compliment to this college. Our professors, staff, faculty, obviously our students who bring that notoriety and prestige to this college and this university. Even during the Great Depression, some call it recession, that happened during 207 meltdown of economy, this college continued to progress technically, multidisciplinary programs, professional schools, and architecture design continue to go forward with great programs, additional programs, and operating in Southfield, Detroit, and globally. Last year, graduates from the College of Architecture and Design exceeded the professional employment rate among recent graduates by over 30% as compared to other colleges or schools of design. That's quite an accomplishment during downtime. The college has outreach programs in China, Europe, and South America. I have to tell you this story for what is it worth. 3 years ago, I went to China for my third or fourth trip to China. This time my wife was with me. And we were in Shanghai in Podang, the business district, and there was a design of the tallest building that is going to come up in China, in Shanghai. So my wife and I said, it's so interesting, I got a picture of this, because they had a design on the board. The building hasn't started yet. I had no idea that 2-3 years later, I will be on a campus whose graduate is designing that building in China. This is what this college is all about. So as I complete my first year as LTU president, I'm continually gratified by the energy, enthusiasm, and commitment of our faculty, colleagues, and students, and our staff, many of whom I have worked with, traveled with them. LTU has a proud history, many of you know, from its establishment adjacent to Henry Ford's Model T plant. So I often consider, being a small historian, that history of Lawrence Tech is intertwined with the history of Detroit, because Michigan was known for timber before it became known for automobiles. And it is automobiles that created the middle class when the whole South came here for $5 a day wages that Henry Ford created. And we were right there, creating the best engineers and architects to the community. So even though we had bad times in the past economically in the nation and certainly in Michigan, this college kept thriving, and it is emerging even stronger. And it is my pleasure to be part of this great institution and pay tribute to our colleagues who have made it so great. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in a treat for the lecture we have designed for you. Thank you very much.
The event that you're experiencing is part of the Taubman Lecture Series at the College of Architecture and Design. And over the last 3 years, Alfred Taubman has been a big part of our lives. He taught a real estate development course here at Lawrence Tech and has made it possible for the college to put on one of the finest architecture and design lecture series in the entire country, featuring notable design leaders over the last several years like Raphael Vignoli, Eugene Cohn, Michael Graves, not to mention Mr. Taubman himself as a featured speaker. As many of you know, Mr. and Mrs. A. Alfred Taubman are internationally renowned art collectors. Over the next few days, they are sponsoring an exhibition of 17 items from their personal art collection. The exhibition will be open to the public starting this Saturday at the UTLC Gallery right down the hall from here. Next Monday night, April 22nd, Rebecca Hart, assistant curator of the contemporary art at the Detroit Institute of Arts, will deliver a lecture on the exhibition at 6 p.m. in this very room. The lecture is free and open to the public. And I just went over my slide. Okay, sorry. There's also an item that is up for bid at the AIAS auction in the next room, and that auction will be open for 45 minutes after the lecture for anyone in the audience that wants to go to it. Tomorrow night, Friday night, at 6 p.m., there will be an exclusive invitation-only opening reception to celebrate the selections from the collection of Mr. and Mrs. A. Alfred Taubman, their exhibition. And Mr. Taubman will be there. We'll make some remarks. And it's one of the hardest to get tickets in the city. So there are 2 tickets available, and they're up for bid. It's under, I think, Taubman Art Exhibit, that particular item. I just checked, it doesn't have a single bid on it yet. And I'm going to bid on it if you don't, okay? Attend, be part of this action on Friday night, as well as support a worthy cause, which we'll hear about in a minute. Bids on this item and other items, again, will continue to be taken afterwards, after the lecture. And everyone here can participate, whether you bought a ticket or not. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone to talk about the AIAS and their auction tonight. Each year, Lawrence Tech's chapter of the American Institute of Architecture students host an auction and a reception to benefit their work on Freedom by Design, as well as other AIAS programs. I would like to now ask Megan Markowitz, a junior student in architecture here at Lawrence Tech, and this year's chair of the auction committee, to come forward and talk about the AIAS and the Freedom by Design program. Megan?
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank everybody who attended the auction, everyone who donated to the auction, and my awesome auction committee that I had this year. Thank you, everyone. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what exactly you're donating to and what exactly we do. So this is the Freedom by Design program, and it's within the AIAS chapter, the American Institute of Architecture students. And what the Freedom by Design program is it's a community service-based program that's focused on helping people in the community with accessibility issues, for example, a ramp. This project that I'm showing here is the Common Ground Sanctuary. We renovated a kitchen over the summer, I believe it was last summer, and this was for a young woman's home. And now they have full access to their pantry, and it was a much needed change for the home. I also wanted to show you what AIAS does apart from the Freedom by Design. The goal of AIAS is to really get the students out there into the profession and to interact with what they will be one day doing. So here are some pictures. We hosted a Beaux-Arts ball at the Fox Theater. We also hosted Midwest Quad, where we brought in about 300 students from around the Midwest. And we also attended the AIA Michigan retreat, which I'm sure some of you have attended as well. And that's all I have.
It is a very worthwhile organization, and the students work very hard at these events, so please auction afterwards. That's how they make their money. With that said, how many of you want to hear Thom Mayne speak? Okay. Little brief introduction. Thom Mayne, FAIA, founded Morphosis as an interdisciplinary and collective practice involved in experimental design and research in 1972. Mr. Mayne is a co-founder of the Southern California Institute of Architecture and a distinguished professor at UCLA Architecture and Urban Design. His distinguished honors include the Pritzker Prize in 2005 and the American Institute of Architects Gold Medal in 2013. He was appointed to the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities in 2009. With Morphosis, Thom Mayne has received 25 Progressive Architecture Awards and over 100 American Institute of Architects Awards and numerous other design recognitions. The works have been published extensively, and the firm has been the subject of numerous exhibitions and 25 monographs. So let us welcome tonight's speaker, Thom Mayne, FAIA.
Am I mic'd? Can you hear me? Is it yes? Yes. Nice to be here tonight with such a lovely, huge crowd here. Just, I've put together quite a few images, and I'm not interested this evening in really explaining project by project, but connecting a decade and a half's work and looking at the meta project. You're coming down to do my mic, right? Because it's not working. I knew that. So you don't want to use this?
It's working, but it's not long.
So it's not working. Okay. Is that better? Should I start over? Just I'm going to go through a large series of work, and I'm going to try to make a connective tissue that has to do with the interests of that have propelled us for the last couple decades. And I don't know where you are. A young man just minutes ago asked me, kind of where do your ideas come from? How do you start? I'm struggling with just like, where does the first thing come from? And I go, oh dear. You steal it. You take it from somebody. When you were a year and a half or 2 years old, you didn't discover language. It was goo goo gaga, dada mama, and it kept going, right? And pretty soon you had sentence structure. And like everybody, I did the same thing, like all architects, right? You become preoccupied with certain things. And that leads me to an introduction, because I came out of the late 60s. And modernism as an idea was somewhat deteriorating. It was exhausted, let's say, in the third generation. And there was a series of challenges started by Robert Venturi in Complexity and Contradiction, who made a very, very clear, kind of articulate discussion of its of a counter argument. And I just happened to arrive at that time. And simultaneous to that, I was at USC, undergraduate. There was an interest in the very beginning of computation, and systems analysis and broad ecological thinking that came out of, with me, it was Ralph Knowles at USC, and it was McHarg, and it was Christopher Alexander at Berkeley. And we were kind of lost. And then the last year, I had kind of classical architects, Pierre Koenig and Craig Elwood, and extremely good architects, and we just ripped them apart. Had no interest in the kind of convention of that. It took me years later to realize that I'd studied under some extremely interesting people, but didn't kind of pick up much from that group. Well, at the beginning, several things happened. Archigram was just publishing their first comic books, and it's where I got my name. Morphosis is a collective, and it was when you're 26, 7 years old, you're just operating on instinct, so wherever that student is, the same thing. Don't worry about it. Just go with your kind of sense, because you really don't know. That's all you have is instinct. And but the sense was that there was something in the air, and the notion of singularity of architect, drawing the line, being the kind of a singular artistic hero, didn't make sense anymore. And it seemed like architecture, especially like film, was a collective act. Out of that came morphosis, and came an idea of a collective practice. And so that my role is much more of a, let's say, a thought leader, as a broader sense of the word, than just a designer, right? And I've got some of my people here today, and I don't know, they'll tell you what they think, but it's both, of course. Sometimes you're very kind of personal, and you enter it, and other times you're talking about ideas, and it's an absolute conversation. And that was very much, again, part of this time. When you start architecture, what I'm not showing, which would start with Rizzoli 1, it'd be the first 2 decades. You students, slow food. 2 decades, you're just tuning up, and you're finding your voice, and you're determining some sort of a program, a meta project, let's say, and you're developing a language which comes out of a response of your interest in how you look at architecture, and it's establishing a voice, kind of who you are as your interest. And with me, I forgot who told me. I was told several times to talk about drawings. Architecture, in a way, is only drawing. It's drawing is thinking. I could stop now and show you all the slides without one word, and it'd be totally okay with me. Everything I have to say is in the work, right? Nobody explains work. It's already embedded with every bit of intelligence, emotional energy, everything that we have to say is found in the work, right? And it comes through processes. And the processes are embedded in the way we think through conceiving things through drawings, and it's moved from mechanical drawings to computation and the digital world, which has just ramped up that whole kind of thinking. And it's, we interrogate, we analyze, we think of the thing that we're putting together, and it's tested with multiple kind of forces. Well, that's also part of an interest then, because you're going to see that literally everything I've done is interested in an architecture which responds to an urban condition. Cities are built accretionally, building at a time. And when we're producing work, we're part of that city making, and it's impossible for me to think of architecture that isn't somehow contributing at an urban level in terms of the broader infrastructure, networking, et cetera, and contributing to the nature of that urban environment. And out of that came certain interests, preoccupations that are the glue, I think, of our work. One has to do with complexity, and there's been a lot of discussion of that, less maybe recently. I'm not interested in complexity as an ideological or as a separate thing. Complexity is just what exists. It's the nature of the world. And if you're reading Joyce Finnegan's Wake, he was just looking out the window and was looking at what looked like that other people cacophony, and he was looking at a different organization of how the world exists in its incredibly complex form. And with that comes conflict. And I've been fascinated with the relationship of the conflictual nature of what it means to be a human being today, that as you look at any numbers of kind of territories that just don't line up, and you're constantly putting together those conflictual territories, whether it's in a really simple term of programming and the mundane kind of part of architecture, or whether it's in a broader cultural, political, economic kind of ideas that we essentially deal with in conflict, and I celebrate that. I'm completely fascinated with that, and the work, I think, still shows its relationship to the struggle. Lebbeus Woods just died last year, and good friend, and somebody that had a huge influence on me. We had talked our whole year, and he talks about architecture of resistance and an architecture of complexity, and you look at his drawings, you can literally see his struggle as an artist, thinking as a thinker, right? And I'm really interested in that, and if I'm successful or not, I hope our buildings talk about that. They're not finished. They have no notion of completion. We make no claim of finally solving something. We're just entering the problem and doing the best we can to talk about it. But in many cases, it's much less about a solution than it is investigating the issues and the problems that we face in today's society. And there couldn't be a more vibrant time than this exact moment, when both conversation is in a crisis, I would say. The conversation in this country right now is the problem with the conversation, with the dialogue, right, which doesn't happen at this moment in our political realm, or it's extremely difficult, let's say, and the kind of differences that are taking place in this very broad, incredibly complex, pluralistic, heterogeneous, diverse culture that we call the US of A. And you would somehow have to honor that diversity and that conflict to understand that that's the essence of our culture. And I see architecture can only be a political act. Maybe that'll come up in questions. I'm kind of amazed with, you tell me, when I talk to most students and ask if they think architecture is political, I get either a blank look or nothing, and then we have something to talk about, because architecture can only be political. There's no such thing as an apolitical architecture. Meaning it's based in values. And there's no way of escaping, because you produce the thing, and it's material, so you have to live with it, right? And in today's world, whether it's tectonic, whether it's ecological, whether it's a social purpose, its connection to culture at many levels, its relationship to economics, no matter where you go, you're making a statement, and it's a political statement. Finally, it's specific, and that'll be maybe the most evident in the work I'm showing, and that I'm interested in the specificity of the urban condition, and each work attempts to define and locate its own problem. And that would be maybe the key to kind of a never-ending generative material, is it's at some point the discussion in any art form is you run out of the generative stuff that produces the work. And architecture is so amazing because it keeps bringing new material. Even if you have a singular or somehow there's a limit to the organizational idea that you can bring into the project that is constantly challenged. And it produces new material out of the specificity of the thing you're looking at, whether it's program, whether it's site, whether it's the culture of the city, et cetera, et cetera. And it's extremely useful as a creative, as a part of the creative process that allows for that generation. And again, going back to the student with the first comment about where the work comes from, it's the result of a series of forces, and you choose the forces you're interested in, right, that start that process of thinking, of which you interpret into an idea, a physical plan, an organization, a coherency, right, into a piece of architecture that begins the work, and it's to finally finds its way back to those values of what you're interested in, all right? Okay, I've loosely connected tonight's talk into 5 parts. First is work which is constraint-driven, definitely connected to its urban environment, somewhat iconic in the sense that it's kind of classical that way in terms of buildings that have an iconic nature. The second one shifts into an architecture coming from landscape, urban, but in its thinking, but it comes from a very different thinking of the role of landscape. The next one has to do with an architecture which is moving more and more into an urbanistic profile, which should end in the book that I was signing today, that I'm not talking about. The next one is a series of current projects that I'm going to go like this, and the last one will be the project that we're working at the beginning, the very, very beginning of the project that we're working at your institution. I'm starting with really kind of the first real projects. So this is mid-90s, and again, I see a lot of people that are not students in your profession, but I'm going to speak to the students. That's what I'm here for. After you've kind of mucked around for 20 years, and you're kind of now just about ready to start like real projects, meaning it has to have at least one elevator in it. It's funny, we had jokes with people, my contemporaries, Todd and Billy and Stephen Hall and Wolf Pricks and Kupi Blau. When we were 44, 45, we still couldn't get arrested to get a piece of work. And we were complaining, but we would always talk about our latest project. And finally we made a deal. We weren't even allowed to talk about the project if it didn't have an elevator. We were done with the residential and the cafes and all that kind of stuff. And that's what you have to prove yourself. Yeah, and you'll be 45 to 50, closer to 50 when you get your first kind of real piece of work if you're practicing solo, if you're not with a larger group. So we start, and here we are in an absolute cacophony typical of Toronto, an environment that I absolutely love. And the building is a series of pieces, and it engages the street. And it literally engages the street. The public and private are seeing a single thing. The zero is kind of a joke. You see it from 2 kilometers down. It's the middle of the highway, and it's the boundary. The program asked for a gateway into the campus, and it was very literally that. And then in LA, not too long after that, we won the competition for the Caltrans building, and it's coming now from a series of forces. It's facing west. And it was the beginning of our double facade system and looking at environment. At this point, we were moving a bit more strategic, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We're shifting from designers to seeing things within tactical, strategic terms. And but it had this double skin. It was producing an open space. It has cultural gestures of the Hollywood sign, of the two-dimensionality. We were trying to deal with the things that are obvious to Los Angeles and in the vernacular. It had a piece of sculpture by Keith Yanier, which we completely embedded in the building. It's 100 meters long, the largest piece of light sculpture he did, and the largest one in LA. And it has landscape elements, which are actually for security. I wanted it to disappear, and I just started talking about security, trying to make it absolutely invisible. And then this piece of infrastructure that came out with the 100 sign is it's the symbol of the group of people that make freeways, that make infrastructure. We left it raw, and we left it infrastructural, and we activated it with the human being. And then just about simultaneous, we were, and I'm the confused one in the group. A priori, a little bit. Can't remember quite where this came in. Where I talked to the engineers, already knew it was thin. Already, I'm missing a thing. It's supposed to. The building should be down here, and we pulled it up because we're about to take the air conditioning out of a tower. And drawing. Brandon, am I the only one with a pencil in the office? Yeah? If I go to a desk, I got to come with my own Eagle 314. Only pencil I've ever used my whole life, Eagle 314. You can't even buy them anymore. I find people that now copy them. And that's, I'm not sure it's good or bad news. I'm just cusp. You guys all use computer. I hope I don't get in trouble for this. You don't have to draw. You don't even have to own a pencil. It's 3 generations back. I am, but I'm an old man. Yeah? And so we built this thing, and something took place that was extremely interesting. This is the building that changed my practice hugely, and we'd won the competition. And before we even were finishing signing the contract, there were all kinds of articles in the San Francisco papers. Can I use the word fuck here? There were all kinds of articles saying, bad boy Thom Mayne, radical office morphosis coming up to our city. And you know, the San Francisco LA's always had this thing. Anyway, and they're going to fuck up our city and da-da-da. I sat down, I was with John Enright, who's now heads up the undergraduate program at SIRC. And it was really interesting. We were like going, wait a minute, we have to approach this in a completely different way. We are no longer architects that are seen as just designers. We have to think in broad terms. And we decided early on that this building would have could contribute to the urban public space in San Francisco. It would be it would look at the rethinking the work environment of a large intergovernmental building, and it would be highly efficient in terms of resources, in terms of sustainability. And we knew we'd be in alignment with the liberal city of San Francisco on all 3 of those issues, and we'll never talk about aesthetic. And ended up being an extremely useful strategy that allowed us to do this thing. And there's a Vespucci Park, San Francisco, on the 11th floor that you can look at the water on one side and the city on the other. The lower piece, instead of a gallery, is a children's daycare center. 55% of the workforce is women. A big chunk of those have kids. They can come down to their breaks and lunch and be with their kids. And on. We took the cafe on the corner. This guy, and they're usually inside these huge, huge office complexes, and we pulled people outside in the plaza that worked there, and really, really went to work. And then the aesthetics didn't say a word. It has a very formal workspace. It's right across from the Circuit of Appeals Court of San Francisco. 12th Circuit of Appeals is a really famous building, and it's connected to a very known structure. And we made this very, very kind of monumental. It's the US of A. It's the largest federal building in the States, and we wanted an elegance, a presence that when people work there, they understand the nature of this building versus another typical building. And then we completely changed the social structure. You get off every 3 floors, and there's tea rooms and meeting rooms and non-program space. And the pieces that stick out here, those are, again, everything is secondary meeting spaces. And you're sitting on glass, and you're floating in the public space. You're conceptually in the public space. And then we brought air through the building. And we have a concrete mass of the ceiling, and we changed the program. So everybody thinks about this building as an energy neutral, not energy neutral, but a non-air conditioned building. What really happened is we had to move the offices, the executive offices, from the outside to the inside, and give the staff on the outside, and that was a huge, huge shift that they had to buy, right? And then these double skins that take off half the solar load of the building, and then on the north side, the fins that guide air through it. And essentially, if you look at the little diagram, we can power 650 homes out of the delta of this building. And then pursuing some of those ideas, a competition that we won 5 years ago, and it's waiting for an economic shift right now in Paris, is the FAIA building. And it's FAIA is the second place winner from the Eiffel Tower, is where the name came from. And it's just a couple centimeters shorter than the Eiffel Tower, which is part of the Paris thing, which is this. And then again, what do you want to talk about this? We could now talk about go to drawing and say, we don't really draw anymore. We make things in 3D. There is no drawing. And here they are, and this is like 1 a day, maybe 2 or 3 a day, right? Model, 3 hours, Z Corp, right? Look at it, draw it, challenge it, program, site condition, on and on, right? Next one, and we keep going through this process, and then it ends up being this finally, and a final model. And now we're looking at it within incredibly precise terms. And the model for us has always been the tool of understanding all the tectonic and the nature of how things work spatially, et cetera. And so here we are in a lot of fonts. You're looking through what becomes the Champs-Élysées to Paris, about 7 kilometers away. Obviously the tallest building in Paris, and a kind of very unusual building, which is not extruded. Once you get away from the plan, and again, I would tell you that I think planimetric, the basic notion of how we made architecture for 1,500 years, is gone. The plan is no longer the main substantial drawing that you work from. You work from a 3D diagram of which the plan is now a CAT scan. And it's funny, we only had the computer, this is probably 20 years ago, and we realized already there was no really any longer a plan in a section. They're CAT scans. There's a horizontal and a vertical cut. Right? And they're more or less free because you can cut them any way you want them. And we were already kind of doing that by hand way back anyway. And then here it is, and we're again urban in an urban construct. So as you move around the building, it's actually a complex of 4 things that tries to solve the very complex urban situation in a lot of fonts, which is an example of kind of bad 60s planning for everybody. But when you look at it, it keeps changing. So now one building leans on the other, and it's actually clearly kind of 2 things. In other cases, you see the kind of the seamless form, et cetera. And if you're in different positions, instead of the extrusion that comes out of a plan, you're constantly getting recomposed things. It re-challenges you to understand what it is. And then it had this incredibly interesting non-site. And couldn't have been better for us. I love problems that start with impossibilities. That's another way, by the way, where ideas come from. Take something which seems to be totally impossible, and that gives you huge opportunities. Because this building doesn't come from an artistic sculptural idea. It's absolutely completely resolving the difficulty of the site. Otherwise, we never could have done this. And so here we are. And it's this funny sliver between the outside ring road and the Knit, and it's got a hole in it, a 30-meter hole that connects the pedestrian walk that connects to the university in Courbevoie. And then it has this very complex connective tissue coming off the metro. 10,000 people enter this building in just under an hour, and it had very much to do with the public space. And then the plan continually changes. No floor is the same as it comes up. And then the section gives us this very unusual public space. This guy, it's 20 stories tall. That's the entry space, and it's still seen as part of the public. And you're coming out of the subway, and you're coming through the escalator up to 8 floors. We're still in the public realm. And then there's the space, and in some ways we interiorized the Eiffel Tower. We use some of the kind of thinking. And then, like San Francisco, now the sun traces east, south, west with the double skin, and it gives us a super, super efficient building. And here's the skin. It's made out of 5,000, 6,000 individual pieces. This is the prototype of that. This is the system. We're scripting now. Another whole conversation. That'd be a separate lecture just on scripting. You're developing performances, and the design comes out of the performances, the criterion. And again, the Eiffel Tower, and then the lighting is going to be, in a way, a drawing of the idea in the most lyrical sense, because we're trying to match now lyricism and performance. They're not separate things. They work together, right? And it really irks me when people make a division of it can either be functional and performance-driven or artistic and lyrical, and it's absolutely absurd. Architecture is the intersection of those two things. It's exactly what it is. And then probably one of the most interesting projects we ever did, we won a competition with the GSA for the Eugene Courthouse. And Judge Michael Hogan was not completely thrilled that we won it, and immediately took me to Washington to look at the Supreme Court as if I'd never seen it. And I had to tell him that actually what he didn't know is that Cal Scobert, it's a completely modern steel frame, of course, and et cetera, and it's an absolutely absurd building in terms of classical sense. It's been just kind of glued together with different ideas, and it's a culture that doesn't have an architecture yet, and we borrowed from our European kind of roots, and we gave him this, and it was this was an act of love. It was a year to go through our tutoring, and I took him to Europe, and it was a fantastic, again, just one of these really great growing kind of experiences. I took him to Nantes to look at Nouvelle, and I took him to Bordeaux to see Richard Rogers in the courthouses. And it wasn't the architecture. Look at these two buildings in terms of the architecture. It was the status of the architect. Because in Europe, you can actually do something, and you have power as an architect. Not like this country, right? Where you're the beholden, you're producing a service. And I am super, super anti-service. That's not what I'm interested in. Right? I would be a waiter or a slave if I wanted to do that. Not interested in doing that. Right? And we spent, and when I took him there, it was the complete shift of our relationship. And Rogers, he didn't care for it, too mechanical and blah, blah, blah. The courtrooms, if you know them, the really beautiful wooden courtrooms are absolutely amazing. And then we went to Nouvelle and Nantes, and he just went nutty because it's really cynical. I don't know if you know, the red courtrooms, they're lit with really blue fluorescent lights. And he walked in with his counterpart, the judge that was the Chief Justice of Nantes, and he screamed out, "Guilty as charged." And it was really hilarious. And then we came back, and luckily we share a love for Bordeaux wine. That helped us a lot, drinking as much as possible at all times. And it completely changed him. He now understood what we were talking about in terms of the relationship between an architect and a client, and it was much more engaged, that we both get to have a voice, we both have an idea of what it is. And of course, with that, we were a bit politically on different sides, and we had to work on that one out, because he's much more of a constitutionalist, and it's more fixed, and I'm much more interested in open-ended stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea, here it is, and we had to show a logic. And again, this is probably one of the hardest things with dealing with clients, because I think the public just sees architecture in fairly literal terms. That responds to very straightforward functions. And of course, it operates on extremely abstract terms. And I had to take him into a logic, because it was not possible studying jurisprudence and his education that's based on case law to work without logic. And I used the Dow notion of fishing. He's a fisherman. And so, okay, I'll use this fishing. And we threw a line. It came out of a drawing. You throw a line. It's used for a proof of randomness. And but you can anticipate where these things will go, but they happen in a very complex order. And then I drew that and made the circulation around it, and it actually worked. He understood. He said, "Okay, you're in a different field than I am, and you were operating in very, very different terms. And your ideas are much broader in terms of the location, because as you know, it can come from anywhere. An idea, it's irrelevant, right? Because sooner or later, it's going to be shaped by all the confining notions, that gravity, it can't leak, program, on and on, movement, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not a problem. And it was this very flowing kind of piece, this set of surfaces, which was open-ended and continuous, and but it was loaded with tradition. It's piano nobile. You'll see the courthouse in a minute. It's processional, et cetera, and we borrowed a huge amount of stuff from the existing courthouses, but it's dynamic. And as you're moving through, you're looking at court 5, and then you move in the court, and the court we spent a year with. It's incredibly nuanced. We took the jury to the one edge. We spent a lot of time, most of them are just rooms. We reconfigured and kind of positioned the judge, and now we're having a good time. I'm playing, he's kind of playing, and I'm focusing on him, because he's, the judge is, that's the third, the sort of segment of our government, it's the most connected to the British system still. They wear the robe, you stand up when they enter the room, right? It's the most formalized. And we were playing on that, and we brought the space into him, put a light over him, and then put this light, and he got the light immediately. It's a guillotine. And it defies defense and prosecution, And then on the side is the jury, and we wanted them, like theater, they're connected and not connected, right? They're looking in the procedure, and we spent huge time. And then the chairs are Puritan, straight up. You have to dress, you can't go in with, you have to dress properly. He was very interested in that, and should be. And you sit, and you're not totally comfortable, and it's purposeful. We spent months redoing the chair, so it was just perfect, and it had to do with the broad notion of the American court over history, et cetera, et cetera. And when you saw the courthouse, the whole thing made sense, because you realize the construct is nothing more but the shaping of the 6 courtrooms. And then Cooper Union, really interesting project, a school that had a huge influence on me that we were using as a model for SCI-Arc in '72 when Haydick was running it. And some interest in purposely developing something very idiosyncratic and kind of specific and high energy, and the opposite of the foundation building that's next to it. It's a square block, which is, there's only about 3 of these in New York, a very, very small block. And just an incredible opportunity working for an institution that produces architects, engineers, and artists. And the skin is now much more about a shaping exercise of an envelope, because the envelope came. We had nothing to do with the envelope. The size of the building came. And the connection of histories, because I would say this building is very, very much contextual. And again, it gets much more complicated, not the way it looks, of course. This is a building built 150 years after the foundation building. It's contextual if you look at the nature of its construction and its toughness, connected to the east side of New York. If you know the east side, it's a very tough kind of place, and the community got it right away. Construction concrete, rough, not architectural concrete. And the publicness, the stair comes in and it's actually part of the sidewalk and moves up, and it's a social space. I'll show you in a minute. And the whole ground floor is open and part of the community, and it stitches together the social functions. And the stair is the Met. It's the New York Library. It's a social space. It's part of the street. What you don't see is you look up, you look all the way out of there's a window, and you're out in the city again. So you're never kind of in it. You walk in and you go up the stairs and you're looking right out again. So you're always connected to the city, which was absolutely fundamental in the social pedagogy of the school, because they see themselves as very much connected to the intellectual creative capital of their investment in a school, right, as part of New York. And that's all New York is this incredible intensity of creative capital. And now, piece of the construction over here, person in my office worked a year on this thing, invented it, built it for a very, very tough budget. And we're now making things that we can't draw. There's absolutely no reason to even think about drawing. They can only be constructed in a 3D environment, and they can only be resolved technically in a 3D environment. And so the pipe over there that's holding these pieces, every piece comes out of our studio, right? Every element goes to the shop, and we're building it. We're back in the Middle Ages. We're architect builders. We're constructing things. And it allows us to put together very kind of eccentric shapes that are really unique. They're not repetitive, and you've never seen them before. And it allows us to do this. And again, we're stopping at only 2 stops. And that's where the social spaces are. We're borrowing from San Francisco at that level. And you're looking at these groups of stairs, and they become lights at night. And everything in here is unique. And it's how you can build today. There's absolutely no reason for repetition. And then just recently, God, I forget, this is a crystal. The little thing there, that is actually not, that is found and is produced in that method, the crystal. And I forget its name. Brandon, you know the one? You don't know either? Are you going to get pissed off as I'm asking you questions? Brandon said, don't talk to me when you lecture. I hate that. And so here we are. I'm drawing kind of over stuff. Or I can't remember quite. And it's a landscape that's going to support this piece, and here it is, right? And it's going to be back and forth in terms of the thing about drawing still, it's so fast, and you can work at the speed of light. And then here's a plan on the landscape, and here it is. And now it's going to be a transition to something. It's building a ground element, and we're making the site. I didn't mention that at Paris, but we actually built the site, is what we did. We had to construct the site. And again, you don't think of that. You think of putting a building on a site, and the site's passive. And we got interested a long time ago. No, the site's active, and you construct the site and the building at the same time. So here we are in this kind of very odd kind of LA construct, and typical of a Los Angeles thing in Dallas. There's similar cities. And the kind of sexual relationship. And now here we go again. A few of the hundreds and hundreds of models that came out of this, the process that made this building. And then here we are, and it's a very, very simple cube sitting on top of this landscape. And it's purposely contrasting with the modern, mostly commercial towers. The concrete was very purposeful. And it needed to be very isolated and monolithic and singular as an idea. And it was also part of a cost model built through very, very low budget. And then we took the escalator, the movement. It's borrowing from, I don't know, Pompidou, or the sequence would be Wright at Guggenheim. But you're moving out of the building instead of in. So you get on the lift and you're moving towards the city. And again, we're continually interested in the relationship of the interior functions of the exhibits and its connection to the city, not as an isolated thing. You always belong to the urban environment. And then here's this new landscape that's built out of indigenous materials, indigenous stone and plant materials that are part of this environment if you were left neutral. And we invented the skin. And I'm not sure I'm going to show, maybe not. We made that. We made the forms. We worked with Gates Construction in Dallas. And I'm missing, I have another lecture that's for a different direction. They advertised this 6 months before the building was finished. They had a full-page ad advertising it. My wife, who's a business person, says, "Tom, of course you have a license on that and a royalty." And I said, "Well, no, not actually." And but again, it's a discussion that goes back to the making, construction, drawing, modeling, et cetera, that today it's more and more engaged, and it's an economic necessity, because we built this for $50 a square foot. It's an incredibly, this is a Target store. And it's a set on random conditions, and we produced it. The main lobby, and then it looks solid, but it's incredibly open. You go to the lobby and you get a 360-degree view of the city. And then these elements which can become part of the roofscape, which are part of a landscape, a lyrical landscape that you're going to find in the garden, and then this 170-foot vertical public space. The beginning sequence out of the lobby. And again, the concrete, some of it quite simple, but some of it actually very, very complex, right, is its shapes. This is all precast. And again, everywhere, you're going to be connected to the nature of the city of Dallas, the outside world. And then the whole conversation was transparency, conversation, connection, and everywhere the human character animates the building, and you're aware of the other people in the building, and it becomes extremely important as a part of the program. And there's 3 elevators in a row, and you're looking through, and it's like a roulette machine, depending on the conditions, you can get them all lining up or different conditions lining up. And the building was seen as an exhibit, and it's something that animates the users that occupy it. And it has to be kind of understood like that. Okay, part 2. A shift where landscape becomes an ordering device or a primary concern with the work. And we started Pomona. This was 92, 3, 4, 5 in there. Little piece on top, the drawing. That was the first image of the building, the 3D form. And we were interested in shaping the site as an idea. And it was going to be a broad notion of an ecological approach to building, where the building now becomes just site, and it goes away as an idea, and it becomes totally integrated. And then it went through a series of we were just getting first computer. We just changed the office. And now the model is working with OVERP, and it's a model that is a technical model that has all the structure in MEP, right? And It's a complete different process. And then by the time we got to Klagenfurt, just later, we're building a part of a city. Was that a dog? He liked the last project. And we're modeling.
I think everyone here, you can hear every word that you say, but I think some of us have the background in public hearing.
Hearing you.
Oh, did I need to be, sorry, okay. All right. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Closer?
Just take it off. Take it off.
Oh, no, I can't hold it. I'll get closer. Like that? Oh, dear. Has this been going on for a long time? That's okay. You just look at the pictures and it makes it easy, right? I told you in the beginning, it probably doesn't matter. If you listen or not, it's irrelevant. Well, now we're constructing, and these are our first drawings, right? And you look at them, and you can't preconceive them, and you don't have the ability even to draw them anymore, right? You're putting pieces together in a way that the connections are not preconceivable. And this is the Hupa Bank in Austria. And this was also kind of extremely interesting, because this is again, we're in the 90s. And this is the first shot we had in Europe, and it's a completely different world. This is for a very conservative country, a very, very conservative city. It's a bank, and this is what they expected. And they never touched this, never discussed aesthetics. That's our job. We're architects. And it was very much about an urban project, and we're building a part of the city. And the environmental response, which is part of the European community already, we're just really following along now, as it's demanded of, all these second skins. And the diversity that's coming out of the interests we've had in terms of shaping buildings and making cities, where we're constantly looking at new conditions, and it's not repetitive, and you just keep saying new things, but it's systematized, it's ordered. And pieces of history, we were using Wagner's Postal Savings Bank in Vienna as a model, but instead of a four-sided thing, it's a three-sided thing. And we're shifting from a classical, that was built at the turn of the 19th and 20th, and we're building this just about at the beginning of the 21st. And everything's transparent, which is part of, a social model, which is now prevalent, whether you're in the commercial world or in the academic world. And then same client, and now we've added landscape, building, infrastructure, and the road and the landscape, the car, all become singular, and we now see it building literally fragments of city, where we're taking control of all the three major components of city between, again, landscape, infrastructure, and building. And building this new ground now, and you're hovering in this space between the ground and a new articulated ground. And it allows you to give very particular focus and to develop an orientation of how you move through the building. Because, of course, this is a horrible way to see something. Buildings have to be experienced. The slides are just giving you kind of memories of things. And it's all about sequence of movement, right? You have to be there. And then you're looking at that space, and now the public space is absolutely geared to the total organization, and you understand that inside out and outside in. And we have a very simple way of organizing public and private. And then kind of the culmination of this work, I showed these sides at the edge. This is a competition we did in Vienna in '85. And the white pieces are pieces of land. It's the first time we kind of articulated the idea of the site is program. So half the program was built in the site, and the rest of it was more traditional building. And this whole notion of active site, active building. And it changes forever. And then here we are many years later. And again, you're going to find that these things, you make them look more continuous than they are. You have an idea, and it will come back to you for 15 years. You don't have an opportunity to actually have the piece of work, right? And it just kind of lingers, and an opportunity comes up. So here we have this campus for the Giant Group in Shanghai, in Pudong, and we're making a piece of a city that crosses a highway, and it's made out of now of these components that we can control, that we've been working with now for 10 years or so. And we can look at the role of each of these subsystems, and we can evaluate how it works within the total system, right? And we can find a way of making something very organized and coherent, but absolutely differentiated, more like a walk in a forest in nature than like a traditional building. So no matter where you are, it's always a different position, but it's absolutely organized. It's clear that it's coherent. And environmentally, it's a very different thing. We only have the building, traditional building is 13% of the project. So it's a very, very different environmental model. And then it's, of course, all about section, because going way back to the school, it's about the shaping of the land. And again, it gives us huge spatial opportunities in terms of defining differentiated spaces for different functions. And again, just little pieces of stuff, the drawings, the steel, every one of them is different, and we drew them all. It doesn't matter. There were, I have no idea, 15, 25,000 individual discrete pieces. There were 4 mistakes. Right? And then the skin came from Switzerland, and there were no mistakes. And again, we're modeling. And now, is it he or she? Does he want to come over here and sit with me? The initial drawing, the idea, the technical drawing, the model, the rendering, the building are one single thing, right? It's all coming out of the digital environment, and it's singular, right? There is no such thing as kind of schematic, DD, working drawings. It flows as a single thing. And then here it is. And again, it's this randomness of putting systems together, which is an interest in a territory between chance and willfulness that I'm going to end with. And for me, I guess it would be for a lot of you, it's really interesting working on a project that you can't yourself preconceive. So even when you walk through it, there's huge numbers of conditions that you never imagined that are just chance behaviors. And it's like building a Gothic town, and it's all the funny little spaces in between that are the most interesting. It's not the organized ones. Those are the ones that, okay, we get it. It's the chances that happen. You go, oh, this is great, and right? And I'm fascinated with a way of producing those conditions. And then, of course, with landscape, you get some dynamicism. It changes. And the country and the city are now singular. And what's building, what's bridge, what's landscape are ambiguous. So the corridor, there's a walkway that goes the 400 meters, and sometimes it leaves the building, it comes out and is in the landscape and passes through a library, and then it crosses again. You saw another one that was a bridge that crossed into another landscape, and then there's these pieces in between that are just found things that we use as gardens, etc. And then it ends in a koi pond and in the water. And then again, these spaces in between. And then the piece coming out, that big nose, it cantilevers, quite a ways, 60 meters, 180 feet. Again, the architects will enjoy this. I showed it to the client, and he said, did it go far enough? I did that in a competition for Chicago. We didn't get it. It wasn't even this long. I was the first out. And I reminded them that they had something like 40 bridges that moved that were built in the first century. It didn't help me. Totally frightened him. He wants to go, should it go a little further? And I go, no, we're okay. And then here's that room, and we're above the lake. And it's the boardroom. The tea room and a social meeting space. Part of a gymnasium, and the roof, the landscape now is kind of lifting off and letting light creep in. Part of the aquatic complex, the entry to the housing and the hotel. These elements that are one of the pieces of systems that contain mechanical systems and structure, but are just part of the language of the building. And then 2 projects which go yet a different direction, which are very much urbanistic and leading towards city planning. A low-cost housing, workers' housing in Madrid, and we were looking at developing a complete new model. The buildings around it, the institutionalized pieces are housing, and we were looking at complete changing the model to something much lower scale, something that had gardens, open space for families, that had the same density, and was using the Moorish model, of which this has, of course, a 200-year tradition. The Moors occupied Madrid. And it's the Casbah you're moving through in a very different organization. It was a really, really interesting project, $60 a square foot. And really thinking of a residential type work versus the institutional nature of the block, which is so detested. And then they all had courtyards, and you'd come up from below from your parking for the courtyards, and the courtyards had communities. And so we built neighborhoods within these spaces. And then landscape was supposed to be on these pieces, and it kind of disappeared. And then Cincinnati, which is the most interesting, I think, successful urban project we've ever been involved with. And it was started by Jay Chatterjee, the dean of the school there. And it started with just the reworking of the stadium. And then the first project was Peter Eisenman at DAC, the School of Architecture. And then right after that, an alumni center. And then Peter Graves built his engineering project. And then Cobb built the music school. And the pavilion off the park, I lost her name. And then they brought in George Hardgraves, right there to there. And they said, okay, we're no longer interested in building icons. We actually, a campus needs a connective tissue. And it was really, really interesting. And they took these buildings down, and you just saw, put the center in. And then Charlie Guathamy reworked the student union. And Moore Udell worked on a services building on one side, and we built an academic building on the other, and we're producing literally a street, a piece of Sean Gimignano maybe, and a complete different discussion of glue. And then with that goes the athletic center, and then housing on top of that. And then Bernard Tschumi came along and built the sports facility, and the whole thing has to do with, it's not a building anymore. It's accumulation of pieces that make a city. There's no elevations, right? It's all about making space instead of making objects. Just an incredibly interesting project, an incredibly complex project. And by the time we got to this one, we had to be really far along in computation, because it's an immensely difficult, just the geometry and the connection of these various uses were really complex. So here we are ending that. The housing is forming a gateway a la Toronto. We're coming up that street. Charlie is at the very end. Right, that's his the redo, and everything is about public space and connective tissue that's gluing the campus together from the original square to the new quadrant. And these huge scale inside outside, which you can't see as you look through, and you're looking through to other parts of the campus, the football stadium, big expanses of landscape, etc. This is the track. This is a piece that connects through our complex to a housing. And I was interested in establishing, like the differences I've been talking about, different moods. Some things are somber and kind of quiet, and other things are bright and lively. And we had a lot of discussion about this because, again, I think maybe more in this country, everybody wants everything cheerful. And I go, no, would you do that with a film or a novel? Or no, some places of the city that are most interesting are somehow chilling or have a different feeling or a somber. Or you want that differentiation. It's what makes really interesting cities. And then again, this connection of things, which is endemic for all our work. And then just really quickly, I have no idea. I didn't turn my timer on. My clock ran out of juice on the way over here when I was on the plane. I haven't got my iPhone, so I'm dead. Just really quickly, some current projects that'll give you an idea of what's happening. And I should say, there has been a huge shift in architecture since '08. We're working abroad just about solo. We obviously in China quite a bit. Things are kind of operating much quicker. We're growing. The buildings are getting large. And it'd be maybe a discussion that somebody wants to have in the later part. We won a competition a couple months ago for a 350-meter tower in Shenzhen. And it has a separate core from the building. It'll be the tallest building of this type in the world. Richard Rogers has one in London. just completed, needle building with the core coming out. And so it's really interesting, the little bridge between, you're going to be going from the core, the elevator core, into the thing across a bridge, and you're going to be 70 stories, 80 stories in the air, and you're engaged in the city. It should be really, really fascinating. And then you come into these courtyards, these gardens, and every 4 pieces there's a garden and an open space that's part of this assembly. And so there's the core and that space between with these bridges. And then it's bending facade. Again, it's a dual skin. This is an old one. We already have a complete new skin now. It's going from solid to articulated as it goes up to the top. We'll actually, I'll be talking about that in the afternoon tomorrow as I return to LA. And again, this ground form that becomes the basis of a piece that moves up. It starts as it links to the ground and it produces this very large public space. We want it for that. Shenzhen is a city that's a very modern city, and they're desperately looking at how to rethink public space within these office environments. And then the core, which is going to be quite unusual, and it's there's a 3-level commercial core, and that leads you to the tower. And as you move towards the crevice, as you move this way, you're actually going to look underneath the space between, and you're going to see people. I think I've got it right here. You're going to see that. You see that space going up, 350 meters. And you're seeing people walking on, and some of the first ones will all have glass floors. And so you're going to see people moving through as they look up. And then it's just taking us far and wide these days. We're working in Morocco and Casablanca. And do I have the slide I want? The little piece over here, we got really interested in that. We were using the Chrysler building. And it has a top and a bottom and a shaft. And so we just kind of took the top and swung it down and said that the building is 3 things. It's a ground piece, which you see, which has some qualities. It's the one that the human being touches, right, that engages with. There's the shaft, which is the moneymaker. It's just an economic aggregate. And there's a top, which is urban. And we just did this diagram. We just flipped it off. We talked about it that way. And we kind of made a building that way, made the top and the bottom more alike. And again, as you move it, it's going to be dynamic, and it keeps changing. And again, there's many of these models, and I purposely showed the scale of this one, right? Because that's all we need at this point is an idea, right? We're in a competition. We just won the competition. We need nothing more than that. And then a building that's just getting close. We're doing the computer sciences building in Ithaca for Cornell, and I'm really happy. This is the next generation of our skins, and they're getting a little more complicated. And in this one, let me see if nope, I want to go back. I don't have the one I want. Shoot, there's a nicer one. But we're trying to do, it became apparent that we use mirror glass because we're trying to double the effect of the dynamicism of the wall. And if it's working, it looks like it is. It's not really mirror. You're seeing the backside of the same element, and we designed it front and back. And we're just trying to get a super energetic 3-dimensional skin, and it's actually performative. It's taking, again, it's the 50% open stainless steel. And it's transforming. It starts smooth, and then it moves into a pattern. And then another project in Shenzhen, and what are we doing? You have to change mindsets when you start working in China, and then we come in way too conflicted and too realistic. And as we work there more, we're going, wait a minute, you got to get completely different mind. We're not allowing ourselves to explore ideas that are absolutely buildable there, that I couldn't possibly show a client in this country. And I've been trained for years working with just the GSAs and the public and the universities. And this one represents that. It's a much freer idea, and it's much more lyrical. And it's part research. Didn't win this, and didn't actually want to win it, by the time we present it to the client, because this is a project where you have to have the right client. I have to have the Shanghai client, the giant project client, and I have to somebody that's there lyrically. Although the first one, which looks a little conservative, it's a great client, and he wants the lyricism of the bent face of that. And then we're doing a huge project in Milan. We're just completing schematic design, and it's the Center for E&I, the petroleum company, largest project in Italy right now. It's their campus, and you'll recognize it. It shares stuff that we've been working with for years. It's urban. It makes a court. It's about space making, and it's all about making public space, about continuing the city, and it's these layers, these forms that connect each other, and they're stratified, and we're using, it doesn't show here, we're using maps, geological maps that show the stratification of Earth structure, where oil comes from, right? And we're literally drawing that and using it as a very literal thing to make the symbol of this piece of work. Okay, and then, okay, now you have to understand, I'm not apologizing, but we're in the very beginning, and when you begin, it's just what it is. And what's maybe evident in the work you looked at is that there's huge reiterations, and it keeps going all the way through the project. And so we have kind of the bigger kind of idea, and we're now really focused on, we take something and we attack it, we interrogate it, right? And out of that interrogation, it keeps moving, changing until we feel we've gotten something. And we're in the middle of that process right now. So I'm showing you my underwear, so to speak, all right? And here we are on your campus, here we are, here, right? Over there. And certain instincts, again, we're talking about a departure point, and it's going to be urban or campus, let's say, at this thing. And it even came out of our interview that certain questions were asked, and I was very straightforward how I answered them. And I thought that certain things were over-designed and kind of cluttered. And I'm going, no, why don't you do less and something bigger scale and simpler, because what it needs is some sort of an organizational idea. And we're starting with this, the new facility as this lineal piece, which is going to bridge the campus, connect to the science and engineering building, and it's going to bridge into over the creek and the landscape, and to the field, to the top. And it's going to present a completion of the court of this guy, and it's going to be movement coming through, and it's going to be a gateway, and then of course the big parking lot, and there's going to be a wall that comes all the way through, a low wall here, and there's going to be an event for the second entry, right? And it's the simple kind of beginning of the project, and it's going to have a scale. We'll talk about this later. That I haven't told anybody about this. Okay, I say these things. I'm just winging it now, okay? So don't anybody. I would have kept going, and it seems like it started with I'm missing a slide, and it's Albert Kahn, and it's the one that Mies redrew. Next time I'm here, I'll come again. We're done with the building for sure, and we need that slide because you guys all know Albert Kahn because you're here. I'm one of the few people that knows he's not among young people a very well-known person. They know Louis and not Albert. And I happen to know Albert and have huge respect for the work. And besides the fact he was one of the most prolific architects in the history of mankind, the amount of work he produced is just totally insane. But you look at these spaces and they were just absolutely amazing. And he was unique in doing industrial factory spaces, which is a great project type, but it's really weird. It kind of disappeared. When's the last time in a magazine you've seen a workspace like an assembly line or something? And they're just phenomenal projects, and they should be, right? And but we like the scale of some singular piece that kind of organizes the campus, and it gives it, in my mind, a kind of stature. It's not a series of kind of smaller domestic scale, or they're not domestic, but it has some weight to it, and it's also quite simple, and it's also extremely flexible. Less is more in this case. You just need huge empty space, and you're going to do whatever you want with it, because programs today in architecture and engineering are continually changing, and you want as less obstacle possible to be able to do the things you want. And again, I'm still a board member at SciArc, and we have the same thing, just a really big, open, incredible space. And UCLA just got the Howard Hughes Hercules space, which is just amazing. I mean, it's totally, totally crazy. Did anybody know the Spruce Goose? It's, I'm just looking at the drawings again. It's crazy. It's plywood, right? It's just one of the most insane, it's something that's not possible it can be done. And that's why it makes it so interesting. You look at it, and this is not possible. It never flew, and they actually did get it a couple feet off the ground, right? And anyway, the scale, the entrance sequence was critical, and it set up a relationship with the landscape site to the right, and which is one of the more beautiful. It just takes us to another area, which is a natural site condition. And here we are, and it's going to lift off the ground, and the landscape will come underneath it, and it'll be a bridge, and just very, very straightforward. And then there's the freeway, of course, would share this line. And I would think in the future it's very possible you would redo the skin of the science and engineering building, become part of that, and it's going to be just one continuous piece. And it's at the scale of the freeway, and it's just one long, low thing. And then again, from the court, you're coming across, it's opening up beneath, and again, it's the entry, I don't know, in terms of numbers of cars, probably the main entry, in terms of the campus. And here we are underneath it, and then now it pushes down, connecting to the auditorium, right? And there's a public space there, and there's these two light wells bringing in light to the space, and this object, and we're just now talking about it. You're going to see it in a minute. The one, that thing, which is the stairway. Everybody moves by stair. There's no reason. There's an elevator for handicap, but there's no reason to use an elevator. You're just moving up 2 and going down 1. And we're just looking at that, and it might be inflatable, it might be GFRC, it could be a fiberglass product, it could be carbon fiber. I heard you guys build stuff here. Is that true? My personal idea, again, I'm way winging it when I do these things, all right? So no, I haven't talked to anybody about these things. I would have you build the thing out of carbon fiber. I'm working with Greg Lynn right now, and he's designing a boat, and it's an amazing material. He shows me his hand holding up big, huge pieces of the boat like this, and it weighs like 1.5 pounds. And it's just, I'm dying to use carbon fiber. It'd be for an engineering architectural school, that's exactly what you'd want to use. It weighs nothing, and all we want is an envelope around the stair. It's perfect material. It's about money, right? That's all it's about. But we're looking at that piece because we have basically a very generic workspace is what you need, not architecture. My essence was also you need less architecture. You need Abercon. And then you have a piece at the entry, and you have this element that says an architect was here, and artistically or lyrically, et cetera, and that's it. And then the space, which has a loft and a workspace. And again, it could be anything you want it to be. And this lower floor that makes the connection to the auditorium space, which is part of the program. And then the ground floor, where you can see you're coming through it, and there's the lower space. You're moving through on a bridge, and then you're looking down at that lower space, and then the upper floor, and again the stairway that's encircled with this object in space, and then the upper mezzanine floor, the roof. And then there's the section as it goes through the valley, as it lifts up, bridges that. And again, a very simple section as you have space underneath it, in this case, connecting to the existing building. And then the bridge part, and then again, these elevations, which we're now completely under investigation, and we're just looking at the materiality, and the direction of those is really quite different than where we started. And then, again, everything's done in model, everything's understood intricatively. So when you look at the model, it's design, it's structure, it's mechanics, it's all the pragmatics. It's very different than the early models you made with cardboard and wood. It's accurate in a way that sometimes is annoying, because again, with computers, as you know, the line is exact line. There is no approximate line, right? It's a measured line. And so when you put these things together, you get way ahead of yourself. They look like they're much farther along than they are. They're still in a schematic phase, but they only look real because you're drawing, you're working in a very exact environment, and you're used to working in an inexact environment. And so here we are, and we're looking at that space, and there'll be many of these, and we're just looking at this object in the space and a stair that floats in it. And we're now, just 2 days ago, we talked about that the stair is the structure that has to hold up the skin, and the skin wants to be light, and it's going to let a light in from the top. And again, the models allow us just to understand very specifically. Oh, you can see here it's floating. I don't want it to touch the ground. Right there. So it's suspended in space. So it's this thing that just floats magically and enigmatically, let's say. We want it to be curious, right? That it doesn't touch the ground. If it touched the ground, duh, we can do that. We know that. And I think that is it. Oh, I put one little piece in here. Can I go for 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes longer? Okay. I don't know. I don't know who was telling me. They kept telling me, "Don't keep talking about drawing, Tom. Don't forget the drawing." I said, "Okay, I'll do the drawing." These are pieces out of a sketchbook, and that I've done sketchbook for years, and these are just things that are. I wouldn't say thinking. That would be putting too much seriousness to it. They're just random. It'd be as if you were writing, and you're just writing random pieces of stuff. It's just stuff that's coming out. I'm not thinking a lot. I'm just drawing, and I'm trying to do it as unconsciously as possible. And this is what we do now. And this has all the same ideas that I've been talking about in my work. And these are about some territory between willfulness and chance. And they have infinite possibilities, each drawing. And they're collective. 3 of us worked on these. And they're my research that are leading to the work. And I'm searching for organizational strategies, not lineal, not axial, not biaxial, et cetera. I'm looking just for ways we organize buildings in a modern sense, and it's closer to the way we see biology than it is to classical architecture. And these are actually interpretations of something I'm going to show you. And they're print and serigraphs. I've done 23 of these that are a series of 10. And I would ask you, when people look at my studio, when I'm walking people, I ask them, are they coherent? Do they make sense? Or are they random? And if they're not random, then even if we don't know why they're organized, they're organized. And I'm interested in that absolute boundary when something is organized, and we're still looking at why it's organized, but it clearly is not random. It's purposeful, and you can see it's purposeful. And I'm fascinated in that, and it came from this. I've done 25 three-dimensional paintings, and I'm using the same processes we have in our office, and I'm looking for new kind of directions. And these are just like the pieces I showed you in Giant. These are all made from 3 identical pieces: an XY line, a Z line, a surface, and an object. Exactly the same piece. There's 3 lines, thick, thin, and fat, and there's 3 vertical lines, the same. And what I'm trying to do is see how many very different things I can make out of the exact same DNA matter. So they're all of a family, literally of a family, right? With 4 types. And then I'm interested in material and the transport of these things into a physical object. And I'm showing you just a few of these, but when I can no longer make something different, I stop. I've exhausted the project. So you can see where very literally that comes from. And I'm trying to make the leap. It's been fascinating because I worked with somebody I brought from Cornell, then another woman from Cornell, then 2 guys from Sark, 4 different people over 2 years. And I purposely not talked to the office a lot, just about none. And they just kind of show up on the walls, and I'm really interested in kind of what comes away, not speaking about them, and it's really amazing. shows up on the board. I say boards, there are no boards. It shows up on the computer immediately. It just absolutely comes, and it's really important to me that you're continually doing, you have to decide what your research is, what you're exploring to keep your own shelf life going, right? You're constantly looking for ways of kind of producing things, but they're going to be back to drawing, modeling, conceptual thinking, etc. It's going to be prior to architecture. Thank you so much.
You want to do just a couple, 3 questions?
Sure, of course.
We have enough time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Go ahead.
The scale at which your firm operates at has changed so much since you started doing various. How is this strategy?
Okay, just for the people in the other room, they would not have heard the question.
He was asking that the scales changed so radically, and how has it changed the strategy? I don't know, I think I was lucky. I started in interest in complexity and in multiple systems, and so we were pretty much pummeled in the early work and saying little simple projects, way too complex. Fetish was the word at the time, fetishizing complexity and intricacy. And it really never made sense to me because it'd be as if you said amoebas are beautiful and porcupines are ugly. I mean, they're just physical characteristics, and they can be very intricate and complex, or they can be very simple. I never got that. But I think a lot of if you took 6th Street House, if you took the Venice 3, early projects, they already had embedded in them urban ideas that were implicit and not explicit. And so strangely enough, we were waiting, and I had friends of mine that recognized that. I remember Weinstein, the dean at UCLA at the time, was giving me critiques and talking to me, and was going, Tom, you have to wait until you get larger projects to accommodate a Cape Manalini, because he said there's like 8 projects there, and you just need more stuff to work with. And I think so again, I'm more comfortable, and it's true, I'm much more comfortable with larger scale work. Although, I'd kind of like to go back. I haven't done a house for 20 years. But I think when people see most of this work, they don't think of like domestic, right? Yeah, I'm like going, why didn't someone give me a call, give me a house? I just like, it doesn't seem like it's happening. And I'm like going, I look at Cooper Union and go, wow, someone should give me that'd be a cool house. Apparently not. Well, that'd be something, environment's changed here. Really, really ultra-conservative in this country right now. Tough to get a product out of this country. Used to be, like LA used to be that was where, for you guys, like SciArc is a very entrepreneurial place like this one. And maybe a third of the class goes right to work for themselves. And LA is this incredible environment. There were always additions, houses, shops, cafes that would service somebody right out of school. And that slowed down, even in LA. There's fewer and fewer people interested in any kind of experimentation. It's just a funny mood we're in right now, yeah? And so the house thing is gonna get more difficult because I think a domestic environment, it takes the most experimental. A lot of people that'll experiment with an office building wouldn't use the same architect for their own house.
Tom, I think the dog has a question over here. The dog has a question for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Any questions over here? There's a question in the back. Let me get the microphone back up to you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. So, sorry. So, well, the first thing is you mentioned early on in your talk that you couldn't talk about buildings until you had an elevator in them. And then you mentioned with Lawrence Tech, there's no elevator. So, but you want people to use the stairs, right? So it's like a circle back to the beginning, right? Anyway, that's just a comment. The question I had, kind of based on this drawing and the computer, and how, how it's progressed into that. Recently, I reread Todd Williams, Billy Sen's article on slowness, and the art, the connection with the hand drawing. Given that your track of work is leaving the hand drawing and it's going in the computer, can you talk about compare it to Todd Williams, Billy Sen in a way?
I was trained the way he was trained, and I was trained the way architects were trained for hundreds of years. I could have been in a Beaux-Arts institution. Look, they happen to be friends of mine. The real brutal answer is they just can't go certain places, period. And I would say they can't go anywhere interesting, period. For your generation, I couldn't imagine not. What would an example be? If I took your iPhone away, you'd be screwed. And you're going to go, no, I like the dial one where I could do this. And so did my grandmother and my granddad. A lot of people want to do that. But now you're somehow attached to some culture of an instrument, of a process or something, right? And you just have to ask very pragmatically, where does it take me? And I would say, not discounting the simplicity of a lot of buildings that don't require a lot, but I'm in your own exploration of architecture over the next 50 years. You guys are just coming out of school in a time when the world is moving at the speed of light, right? And everything interesting will come out of the tools that are available to you. So the models I'm showing you, if you could look at this really close, you can't draw it, you can't conceive it, you can't make it. I could put 100 people together. I could take the top 100 people here and say you have a week to make the model, you couldn't do it. Add another 100, still couldn't do it. It's literally not possible. You cannot make this model. You could not work out the connections. It's not doable. And it's like any field. You enter medicine, molecular biology, name your field, engineering, that your generation is the next generation making the generation in front of you obsolete. That's the idea. It's called evolution, right? And all you want is the tools that take you someplace. It's as simple as that. It's not complex, right? And you can get both. BMW is coming out with their first electric car, and my wife had the Honda hybrid, the first one. It was a little experimental car, a little tiny one, and it was really typical of 60s energy thinking. Got 70 miles a gallon. You didn't drive it really. You sailed it. It's not really a car. And it was a little small, so it wasn't very comfortable. Really shitty radio. No insulation. If anybody hit you, you're done. I mean, forget it. And you paid the price for everything to get your 70 miles an hour. Totally stupid. And it's stupid just was it's a really old-fashioned idea of giving up something to get something. BMW is coming out with a car. We did a competition for them that Wolf Bricks won. And I remember sitting with the head of design, and they were coming out with their first hydrogen at that time. Hydrogen car. Stronger, lighter, faster. And the car they're replacing was one of the big ones. It was the 800 or the 600, and it had like 500 horsepower. The new one was going to have 550 horsepower. And it uses no gas, right? That's what you have to do. And it's beautiful, and it's a great radio. All right? No, really. And it's just not, because again, they're who they are. This is not against Billy and Todd. They'll produce beautiful buildings, and it'll be of their era. They are going to be in their middle 60s or whatever they are, right? And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the gang I got working for me. They average 35 or something. And no one would be interested in that. They want to do something they've never done before, all right? And like I was discussing the use of carbon fiber, I want to use carbon fiber just because it exists. Simple as that. It exists. I'm going, damn. I was just talking to a guy that won a competition in Washington somewhere, and they had a pavilion, very simple. They won it with Pete Walker, the landscape architect, and they wanted a pavilion, and they showed it with a really thin roof, and it was 100 feet. And they wanted it to be a foot. Right? 100 feet. A truss should be 8 feet, 9 feet, 10. It'd be 1 to 10, right? They're connecting up with carbon fiber, and they can make a plane of a roof at 1 foot that spans 100 feet. The trouble they're having, they can't find an engineer because it's proprietary. Normal engineers have no clue what carbon fiber is, and they don't have the techniques. Boeing he's working with won't give them its proprietary information, and BMW and some of the car manufacturers all have it, but they've developed their own technology and they're not going to share it. but you can make it and test it. But the point being, of course, anybody here would go, damn, yeah, I want to be the guy that does the person that does the 1 foot span of 100 feet. It'd be just totally outrageous. And all it is just using what's on the market, right? Simple as that. Anyway, I think it's the appropriateness of the technology in terms of where you want to go. You just want it, what do you want it to do? How do you want it to work? Simple as that.
And one final question.
Hello? In your Moroccan project, I hope I heard you correctly, you mentioned that you flipped everything where the top became the bottom became the top, and you mentioned that the urban was placed at the top, and I was just wondering what the reasoning behind that was, because usually you want to activate the ground plane, and I was just wondering.
I just saying, it's a really, that's a competition model. I haven't started yet, and it'll go through a lot of changes for sure. And it was a really, really kind of a simple model. We were just saying top and bottom have particular uses urbanistically. One local entry, streetscape, et cetera. One urbanistic from the city, from the vantage point of the city. The middle is workhorse. That's all. And we probably won the competition because that's a whole nother conversation, which is also dangerous, because we made a very, very clear argument. And that goes back to strategy, which should be worth talking about. That's strategy versus building. Make sense? Because the strategy people get, but you're working with business people, et cetera. The design, nobody gets. No, really. I mean, architecture is esoteric as poetry or modern classical music. Nobody understands architecture. It's not, you never studied it. I've had people that have been really aggressive about architecture, and I'll ask them, well, are you closer to Lucan or to Mies or Corbusier? And they've never heard of those three people. And I'll say, well, I just mentioned Yogi Berra and Mays and Lou Gehrig, so obviously baseball is not your sport, all right? But the strategy is a way of entering the project, which I think is your generation, because that wasn't mine. That's recent for me. And that one was absolutely strategic. We had just an ironclad little argument that just was sweet, because it's true. We understood that the body was the workhorse. And you wanted because what we said is this is where the architectural investment is, i.e. the dollar investment, is on a top and a bottom. And we're now looking at that with the skins. And we're starting with more raggedy, three-dimensional skins, and they get smoother as they go up. Because at 100 to 300, 100 stories, you don't care. You don't need it. It's a form, right? And so you start even developing ideas of a skin that has to do with scale, that has to do with that bottom-top dialogue. And then we're going to say goodnight, right?
We're going to say goodbye. Thank you, Thom Mayne.